Hello everyone, I'm Javier Cifuentes-Faura from the University of Murcia in Spain. It is an honor to participate in this conference as a keynote speaker. Thank you very much to all the members of the organization for inviting me. We will talk today about public administration with a lecture entitled The Importance of Transparency and Open Data, analyzing the case of state transparency portals in Mexico. In recent years, there has been a growing demand for transparency in the public sector, driven by citizens' desire for greater understanding and control over government actions. This demand translates into a need for enhanced government accountability, ensuring that public officials are responsive to citizens' issues and needs. Accountability is a cornerstone of democratic political systems, encompassing both the institutions that monitor the behavior of public officials and the mechanisms that ensure their responsiveness. Transparency in government information provides citizens with better understanding and control over the action of politicians. The publication and dissemination of information helps to control the performance and decisions of political representatives. Greater transparency reduces information asymmetries and increases the degree of trust in politicians by citizens. In addition, it helps to prevent cases of corruption and illegal acts. Transparency refers to public access to information and the governmental decision-making process and implies the opening and active disclosure of information by the authorities, allowing citizens to learn about governmental actions. Open government, on the other hand, advocates collaboration, citizen participation, and transparency in government decision-making, including the use of information technologies to facilitate citizen participation and improve government efficiency. Despite its importance, some governments withhold information to hide inefficient practices. Open data portals have become key tools to foster transparency and enable citizen participation in government processes, monitor government actions, evaluate the accuracy of expenditures, and obtain data to support decision-making. However, making data available does not automatically guarantee greater transparency. The mere availability of information does not guarantee transparency, as this effectiveness is affected by various factors such as the motivation of public officials, the capacity and interest of citizens to use public information, and specific circumstances such as citizen demand for accountability and the level of discretion in the monetary tasks. This study focused on Mexico, providing a comprehensive examination of the dynamics of transparency and governance within a specific context, and enriching the academic discourse on these issues. Mexico's geographic and socioeconomic diversity, along with the differences in levels of development and government administration among its various states, become points of interest for identifying determinants and best practices that could be relevant for other countries seeking to establish or improve their transparency policies. Mexico has implemented laws and processes to foster transparency, such as the Federal Law on Transparency and Access to Public Information in 2002, or in 2003 the Federal Institute of Access to Public Information was created to ensure transparency. Mexico joined the Open Government Partnership in 2011, committing to adopt principles of transparency. Web portals were implemented to disseminate information and make it accessible to all citizens. An annual ranking of state transparency portals or websites was also developed to evaluate transparency and make known the shortcomings of the state's web portals and encourage them to improve in successive years. This assessment delves into the disparities in transparency evident among state web portals in Mexico. Panel data analysis techniques are employed to identify the political and economic factors that influence transparency levels for each of the 32 Mexican states. These factors include unemployment rate, population density, state debt, and the ruling political party's ideology. The analysis leverages data from the established rankings of state transparency portals. This ranking serves as a comprehensive measure of transparency and information accessibility on state government websites. It utilizes a set of indicators to assess the comprehensiveness, timeliness, and user-friendliness of the information presented. Several empirical studies have identified specific factors that influence government website transparency. These factors can be broadly categorized into economic, political, and social dimensions. In accordance with institutional theory, a local government that receives financial transfer may be obligated to disclose more information than one that does not receive such transfers. This is to demonstrate compliance with proper conduct or actions. Another variable that influences transparency is taxes. So, the hypothesis 1 is transfer received influence the level of government transparency, and the second hypothesis of this study is tax effort impacts transparency levels. Debt can also have a significant effect on transparency. While some studies suggest transparency increases with higher debt to demonstrate fiscal responsibility, agency theory suggests that lower levels of debt are related to more transparent institutions and budget procedures. To further explore this dynamic, we established the following hypotheses. Hypothesis 3. Debt levels affect governmental transparency. The unemployment rate is a key indicator of general economic conditions. It is directly related to economic growth. When unemployment is low, it usually indicates higher economic output. In addition, trends in the unemployment rate are closely linked to other labor market metrics. Hypothesis 4. Unemployment rate influences the level of government transparency. The intricate relationship between transparency in management and the advancement of good governance has been extensively documented. Institutional theory posits that political parties play a key role in enhancing municipal transparency, as increased scrutiny from opposition parties tends to promote greater openness. The hypothesis 5, political party ideology, is associated with the level of transparency of government web portals. And the number 6, political strength, influences the level of governmental transparency. Finally, in examining the relationship between transparency and demographic variables, it is found that population is a key driver of e-transparency, with population density also playing a significant role. So the hypothesis 7 is higher population density is associated with the level of transparency of government web portals. Transparency and access to information are fundamental pillars for the functioning of a democratic society and for the development of a country like Mexico. This principle promotes accountability, strengthens trust in institutions, prevents corruption, and helps detect fraudulent acts. Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index for 2022 underscores the existing problem in Mexico. Mexico ranks 126 out of 180 countries analyzed, scoring only 31 out of 100 possible points, 0 indicating highly corrupt and 100 indicating very clean. This data highlights the need for Mexican government institutions to take action and enhance transparency. Recognizing the importance of transparency and public access to information, Mexico has implemented new laws and regulations in recent years. These initiatives guarantee that government information is readily available to all citizens. This is essential to strengthen democracy, improve governance, and promote the sustainable development of the country. The foundations of transparency and the right of access to public information in Mexico are related to the constitutional reform of 1977, which modified Article 6 to guarantee the right to information. In 2002, the Federal Law of Transparency and Access to Public Governmental Information was published, and the Federal Institute of Access to Information was created as the body in charge of promoting and disseminating the exercise of the right of access to information. In 2015, the General Law on Transparency and Access to Public Information was enacted, being a significant example of how international standards and the empowerment of civil society have led to tangible improvements in access to information regulations. It has been pointed out that accountability commitments have focused on the generation of products focused on transparency, without determining mechanisms for control, evaluation, and monitoring of government actions. Since 2006, Mexico has been measuring open government in state governments. Subsequently, a systematic and longitudinal investigation of transparency sites gave rise to the ranking of state transparency portals, which is prepared annually for each of the Mexican states. This ranking has undergone some methodological changes, and since 2015 consists of 5 components: legal obligations, open data, vertical collaboration, horizontal collaboration, and interface. Legal obligations linked to the public policies, laws. Open data covers aspects like data quality, search engine effectiveness. Vertical collaboration evaluates direct communication with public managers and citizens. Horizontal collaboration evaluates online co-production and collaboration through social media platforms. And interface measures actions taken to improve portal visualizations. In each of the statewide portals, 58 items are reviewed. Each variable is coded using a dichotomous scale, assigning a value of 1 when the evaluated characteristic is present and 0 otherwise. The sum of these values determines the score of each component. A total score is calculated for each state by adding the weighted scores of all items evaluated. This total score reflects the level of government transparency of each state and can vary between 0 and 100. The higher the value, the greater the transparency. A longitudinal panel data analysis was conducted for the period 2015 and 2020 to identify the economic and political variables that explain variations in the transparency scores of each Mexican state. The dependent variable is the transparency indicator of Mexico's state portals, and taking into account the variables that may influence transparency according to the literature review and data availability. The independent variables are transfers, debt, fiscal, unemployment, density, ideology, and majority. The main description of these variables are shown in the table. Chihuahua in 2020 is the state with the highest transfer per capita, and the lowest is Colima in 2015. The public debt owed by the state of Coahuila de Zaragoza to creditors in 2016 was equivalent to 9.6% of gross domestic product, this being the highest value of debt during the period analyzed. Unemployment was lower in Guerrero during 2018 and higher in Tabasco in 2016. Taking into account the hypotheses to be tested, the factors that affect the transparency indicator of Mexican states during the period have been analyzed using the following econometric model. In the process of estimating the model, several methodologies appropriate for panel data analysis were used. These methodologies included pool regression, fixed effect regression, random effect regression, and regression with robust errors. By combining data from different units over time, Panel data regression provides more efficient estimates compared to cross-sectional or time series regression by exploring the information provided by both intertemporal and inter-individual variation. Panel data models take into account the heterogeneity or endogeneity of the units of analysis, including unobservable variables, under the condition that these change little or not at all over time. This individual endogeneity can be handled by fixed effects model, or it can be treated as random in random effects models. A series of robustness tests were conducted to assess the adequacy of the model. These tests included the F-test and the Preuss-Pagan-Langmuir test and the Hofmann test. The study of collinearity through Pearson's correlation coefficient shows that there are no problems of collinearity between the variables. Collinearity is a serious problem if the correlation coefficient between two dependent variables is greater than 0.8. The highest correlation is between the political variables and between population density and fiscal effort. There are also no multicollinearity problems given that the mean FIF is 1.42. To determine the most appropriate regression, different statistical tests were performed. The F-test and the Preuss-Pagan test indicate that the best estimate is a pooled regression. Under these circumstances, the Hofmann test for choosing between fixed and random effects did not need to be performed. Before performing the pooled regression, it has been verified that there are no problems of heterostaticity, since in y-test the p-value greater than 0.05 indicates that the hypothesis of homoscedasticity cannot be rejected. The results of the pooled regression are shown in the table. It is worth asking whether the same results would be obtained if Mexico City were not taken into account, since it has considerably more data than the rest of the states. The conclusions remain the same as for the pooled set of all states, except for the population density variable, which is not significant and in the previous case was significant only at 10%. In addition, the variable that contributes most positively is depth, and the variable that has the most negative influence is transfers. The positive effect of the fiscal effort positively on the transparency indicator indicates that higher tax burdens can lead to higher expectation of government accountability and transparency. As citizens contribute a greater share of their income in the form of taxes, it is reasonable for them to accept greater transparency in how those resources are used and what they are invested in. A higher tax burden may require more effective controls and regulation to ensure proper management of tax funds. Since debt has a positive influence on transparency, the higher the level of debt, the greater the effect on transparency. Governments must usually disclose the debt amount, terms, interest rates, and the use of funds raised through debt. The results show that transfers together with unemployment and population density have a negative impact on transparency values. Transfers may reduce the need for governments to be accountable to their citizens by not feeling the need to raise tax revenues through local tax collection. This may decrease the pressure on local leaders to justify their fiscal policies and expenditures to the population, which could lead to less transparency. Our findings show that higher levels of unemployment imply a lower value of the transparency indicator. The analysis found no significant impact from political variables. Neither holding a majority nor being part of a coalition seems to affect transparency levels. Transfers have a negative effect only on the components of collaboration, whether horizontal or vertical. If governments rely on incoming transfers, they may be more inclined to comply with the bureaucratic and formal aspect of ensuring the flow of transfers, which could result in less implementation of collaborative practices in the Open Government Framework. Those states with higher levels of debt as a percentage of GDP are more committed to complying with legal conditions to maintain transparency. And if the government is right-wing, it seems to have a greater interest in complying with legal conditions for transparency. For the open data component, debt, tax effort, and unemployment are key factors with the same things as in the general transparency indicator. And now we go with the main conclusions of this study. The importance of transparency in government management, especially through web portals, underscores the need to understand what drives disparities in the level of transparency in local governments. A deeper understanding of the factors that influence the acceptance and use of open data technologies can guide policymakers in identifying effective policy instruments to encourage the use of these technologies. In addition, the use of open data can serve as a starting point for democratic dialogues facilitating interaction between open data providers and users to discover lessons learned and how this can benefit governments in improving their processes, services, and decisions. The information provided by the transparency ranking reflects the complexity of evaluating transparency, considering not only legal compliance but also aspects such as data quality, citizen collaboration, and accessibility of information. Factors such as population density, unemployment, debt, transfers, and fiscal effort influence transparency. The level of transparency is not affected by the political affiliation of the government in power or by majority rule, except in the case of the legal action indicator. High population density can, in some cases, hinder transparent management and affect the transparency indicator, highlighting the need to adapt strategies to different local contexts. In states with higher employment rates, government resources may be limited, which could impact the effectiveness of transparency programs. This could result in less investment in the infrastructure needed to maintain up-to-date and accessible transparency portal, leading to less transparency. Debt has a positive effect on the transparency indicator. This indicates that the higher the level of debt, the greater the effect on transparency, since at higher debt levels politicians feel more obligated to disclose information. Fiscal effort as a percentage of GDP positively affects transparency, so a higher tax burden can lead to higher expectations for government accountability and transparency. To achieve a higher fiscal effort, Mexico should implement robust auditing system. When evaluating the variables in relation to the specific components of the transparency indicator, it stands out that transfers mainly affect the collaboration components, while debt and fiscal effort are determinants in the openness of data. The government should choose to achieve greater fiscal effort, increase administrative efficiency, especially in those areas with high population density, prioritize the use of open data as one of the key components of the transparency indicator, and encourage citizen participation in decision making. Policymakers could implement strategies that address economic and social concerns, recognizing that factors such as high population rates may contribute to less government openness. Difficult economic situations may influence the government's willingness to share information, so they should encourage transparency policies. The implementation of open government policies is essential in Mexico to create integrated administrative platforms and ensure transparency. The promotion of open data should be a priority, with a focus on publishing relevant information such as budgets, public expenditures, and laws in open and easily accessible formats. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. It has been an honor to participate in this conference. You can see my email address on the screen, so if you have any question, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.